For a lot of people, their car is their pride and joy. They paid a lot of money to buy it, and they've poured even more money into it to keep it full of gas and well-maintained. Because of that, they wouldn't dream of abandoning it and letting it fall to rack and ruin. Not everyone takes such good care of their vehicles though, which is why we've been able to put together this whole video of amazing cars that have been forgotten and abandoned by their owners. Vintage car enthusiasts will immediately recognize this vehicle as a classic 1932 Ford Hot Rod. It's not looking its best right now, but it's lived an incredible life. It was found in a backyard in glamorous Hollywood, California, and once belonged to the Barris Brothers custom car business. During the 1950s, it was even adapted for use as a drag racer. Some modernization work was carried out at the same time, which is why it has 1949 Pontiac taillights and the pilot's seat from a Lockheed P-38 Lightning plane for the driver to sit in. It's clear from its condition that it would require a lot of love and attention to get it back up and running again, but it shouldn't be impossible to do so. We found it for sale at an auction website for $50,000. Perhaps you're the right person to restore it to its former glory. Sticking with the topic of drag racing cars for a moment, this Kellison Funny Car is a priceless piece of drag racing history from Tennessee in the USA, and it had been considered missing for 35 years before it was finally found in Nashville. The current owner had no idea how rare or valuable his rusty old car was. Made back in 1967 as little more than a bundle of fiberglass held together by cloth, it was driven from that year until 1972 by drag racing legend Larry Stewart. Stewart built the car himself using a discarded Kellison body as a template. He nicknamed his creation the Hobo. By 1980, its racing days were over, and it ended up in a private garage where it stayed for more than 30 years, waiting for a restoration project that never happened. Given the sheer number of custom pieces that have been added to it over the years, including a Pontiac rear end, there's no doubt that this old racing car is one of a kind. When you hear the name Bugatti, you instantly think luxury car. The name is synonymous with glamour, and cars made by Bugatti have changed hands for huge sums of money for decades. That means that finding them abandoned is exceptionally rare, but it does occasionally happen. Take this 1937 Type 57S Adelante, for example. It's one of only 17 ever made, and it spent 30 years hidden in a garage in Newcastle, England. The car belonged to a reclusive doctor named, appropriately enough, Harold Carr. His family had no idea he owned it and only found it when they came to clear out his belongings from his home after he passed away. The car was originally owned by Earl Howe, who was the British Racing Drivers Club first ever president. Dr. Carr purchased it in 1955, but only drove it for 5 years before parking it in his garage for the last time. It's only ever driven 27,000 miles. The family decided to cash in on their unexpected windfall and sold the car for more than $4 million at auction. There isn't much ground clearance in this old dragster, but it's yet another long-forgotten racing vehicle that seemed to disappear off the face of the earth for decades before it was rediscovered in 2016. The Hemi-powered front-engine dragster was once the property of Jim Smith, a household name in Dayton, Tennessee, who started his drag racing career in the late 1950s. This unusual vehicle started out with a 98-inch wheelbase, but was almost immediately stretched to 134 inches to more closely resemble the longer dragsters that were fashionable at the time. Smith made the torsion bar front suspension rig at home and connected it to 1940 Ford spindles on a round tube front axle. The 354 cubic inch Hemi engine was the jewel in the vehicle's crown, although the homemade aluminum fuel tank is also a work of art in its own. For a short period of its racing life, the car ran on neat alcohol. Smith and his custom car won the final race of the 1964 season in the Harriman drag strip with a speed of 167 miles per hour, but retired from drag racing after he heard that the winner's purses were going to be cut at the end of the year. It's been its whole time since then in the woods at the back of his home. If you were someone who dealt and traded in classic cars, you'd have been interested in this 1965 Corvette convertible, even if you didn't know the history behind it. When you find out about the history, that interest will turn into full-blown excitement. This beautiful old car was almost buried under debris and dust in a garage in Pennsylvania, where it had been hidden away for almost 20 years until January 2018. Only on close inspection would anyone notice the protectoplate, which bears the name B. Skelton. That identifies the former owner as 1950s and 60s speed racer Betty Skelton, a trailblazing female driver and pilot who broke records on the ground and in the air. This particular Corvette was built especially for Skelton and used for advertising purposes. It spent 5 months as a showroom car at the Chevrolet Central office before Betty took delivery of it in May 1965, but nobody can say for sure how it came to be squeezed into a garage next to a dog pen so many years later. Some barns are bigger than others. That means that some barn finds involve the discovery of just one classic car, and others, like this one from rural France, involve a whole 81 of them turning up at the same time. Even among a collection so vast, one vehicle stands out head and shoulders above all the others. That's this 1968 Lamborghini Miura P400. Despite its age and its coating of dust, it's still in full working order and has its original V12 engine in place, an engine that's only driven 48,000 miles in its whole life. The car was scheduled to go to auction in late 2019 with an expected price of around $600,000. Also in the barn was a Porsche 356 Coupe, although that vehicle hasn't survived the passing years quite so well and is missing several vital components. Also in the barn were 2 Lincoln Continentals, a 1981 Chevy Corvette, and 3 Lancia Flaminias. Whoever owned this barn obviously had expensive taste and the means to indulge them. It's a sad fact that classic and forgotten cars sometimes only come to light when their owner has passed away. The family of the owner doesn't know that the cars exist, and they only find them when they come to their old home to straighten out their affairs. That's the story behind the discovery of this next find, but it's a story with a happy ending. The star of this tale is a Jaguar XK140 SE Coupe with a Michelotti body. Believed to be so rare that it might even be one of a kind, it had been under a blanket for years in a barn in Belgium. But after the owner died, his kind-hearted family decided to sell it and donate the proceeds of the sale to charity. They hoped that the old car would raise $50,000, but they'd vastly underestimated the enthusiasm of classic car collectors. When the bidding was done and the auction was over, the car had fetched a price of just over $500,000. You almost never find a 90-year-old car in condition as good as this, but then this car had the advantage of being stood still and protected by a tarp for 50 of those years. It's a 1927 Marmon Model L. Depending on who you listen to, it's either one of only 2 left in the world, or it's literally the only remaining model. The car turned up in Illinois in the USA and is yet another case of a family combing through the possessions of a deceased relative. The full history of the vehicle is unknown, but we do know that its last owner purchased it in 1962, towed it home, and then never drove it. During the peak years of this model's popularity in the 1920s, there were more than 50,000 of them on the roads. The Model L is distinctive because of its 2-door, 2-window setup, and it's this aspect that makes the barn find so unique. What a great restoration project for somebody. Archaeologists are used to digging up strange and unusual things from the ground in and around Stonehenge in England. But even they were surprised when the rusted shell of a 1932 MG-72 came out of the ground in September 2017. The team was hoping to dig out an old military base on Salisbury Plains and expected to find an artillery position. But instead, they found all that's left of the old car. It's ragged and rusted, but it's still sitting on its original wheels, and the frame is capable of supporting itself. They have no idea how it got here, but the most likely explanation is that it belonged to a soldier who was training at the base. The fact that its drive shaft was found next to it suggests it was in pieces when it was abandoned, so perhaps it's a repair project that was never completed. Only 2,000 of these cars were ever built. It's doubtful that this one can be restored, but it might make an interesting museum piece. In the here and now, companies like Tesla are trying to make electric cars the next big thing in driving for the 2020s. They're a long way from being the first to try, though. The Electric Fuel Propulsion Corporation was trying to start the electric revolution way back in the 1960s. This Mars 2 EV car, built in 1969, was one of the results of their experiments. The unique vehicle is built around the frame of a Renault and enjoyed a few test runs before being abandoned in a barn in Sweden in 1975. Incredibly, after all that time, it's still in full working order. It can even accelerate up to 60 miles per hour, although its maximum range is barely double that. So it's not a car that you'd want to take for a long trip down a highway. The company planned to build a limited run of 115 of these vehicles, although it's thought that only 42 were ever finished. It's not a powerful vehicle, but it's an interesting piece of history, and whoever got it for less than $10,000 on eBay landed themselves a bargain. A car that's built specifically for use in a movie doesn't have a purpose when the filming of that movie's over, even if it happens to be the coolest car in the world. This is the Batmobile that was used in the making of the Batman film The Dark Knight, which memorably starred Christian Bale and the late Heath Ledger. It seems that a rich collector bought the car after the movie wrapped and had it imported to Dubai, but then simply gave up on caring for it and left it to get dirty and dusty. The car is full of cool Batman touches, including the superhero's logo on the steering wheel. It even has functional CCTV cameras inside, allowing you a panoramic view of the world outside your car. A pair of Indian car enthusiasts saw it and couldn't bear the thought of it rotting away, so they bought it for $900,000 and took it to a specialist garage. It's now being fitted with a working engine and can legally be driven on the road. While we can't say for certain whether some of the other cars in our video are truly the only examples of their kind in the world or not, we have total clarity on this one. It's the Java 250, and it was built by Belarusian designer Alexander Dolovsky during the 1950s. It looks a little rustic and ramshackle, but it's an incredible feat of engineering. Dolovsky started with a Java motorbike, connected it to a sidecar, then fashioned an automobile frame to go around the outside as a body. He added a single door for access and fitted a luggage rack to the roof for storage. For the comfort and convenience of the driver, there's even an ashtray and a fan by their side next to their seat. Dolovsky hoped that a car manufacturer would like this design and pick it up for production, but sadly for him, nobody ever did. It therefore stayed in his garage for 70 years until a private collector took ownership of it in 2018. The new owner hopes to get it back up and running in the near future. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.